Our objectives for today are to define what a business is. We'll also look at this idea called the factors of production. We'll describe the private enterprise system and compare micro versus macroeconomics. We'll explore the forces of supply and demand, and we will analyze the equilibrium price and factors that influence its change. We'll also identify the stages of economic performance and evaluate how that performance is measured. So why does this all matter? Understanding business is important because whether you provide someone a paycheck or you're receiving one, or you might in the future, you're part of a business. So it's good to understand what business is about. Now, economics matters because it's about choices. It's how we choose to allocate scarce resources and how those choices impact others. Ultimately, that means economics shapes the business environment. So let's learn more. On the screen, you'll see a really important definition. Business is defined as the heart of every business. There's some type of exchange going on between a buyer and a seller of a good and or service, and the idea is to make a profit. Now you'll see a list of some of the major businesses today known as the Fortune 500 companies at this site. Throughout our course, you'll notice through the presentations that there are links throughout the Prezi that you can click on to access more information that's current regarding some best business practices or to help illustrate relevant concepts or to learn more about something that might interest you. As this is an introductory class, we're looking at everything at a very high level. So if you see something that you like, feel free to learn more by clicking on those links or watching the videos further. Okay, on the videos, you'll notice right below them, you can access them in Prezi, or right below them, you'll see that it'll give you information about how to find it via YouTube. So looking at that definition, that a business has an exchange going on between a buyer and a seller, where there's a good or service being sold and or service being sold in exchange for a profit, for money coming in. What type of business comes to mind? You might think of a business like 7-Eleven. You go in there, you want to buy a bag of chips. You are the buyer. 7-Eleven is the seller. You're purchasing a good, which is that bag of chips, and to do so, you're providing them money, which ultimately will profit 7-Eleven. 7-Eleven is considered a business under this definition. Why that model might be very easy for some of you to understand, it's not necessarily what we think about when we think about nonprofit organizations. So what about a nonprofit organization? Does it meet this definition as well? Is it a business? Well, the answer is yes. A nonprofit organization still needs to have that money coming in order to operate. A good example of that, I used to serve on the board of a nonprofit organization called Workplace Fairness. Our main mission was to help provide information and increase awareness regarding workplace rights. What your rights are in the workplace, as well as what your employer should know. So we had a website. We still have it today. It's called workplacefairness.org. Please check it out. You'll get a chance to later in the course as well. On that site, we give lots of great information to individuals. Okay, while that site is a really great product, you don't have to pay to use it. So where does the money come from? You'll notice on that site that there are places that people can actually click on advertisements. That's some of the revenue that we had coming in. But why do we need money if we don't need to generate a profit? Well, nonprofit organizations have expenses just like traditional businesses. We had employees we had to pay to help maintain that website, to help create the content, and to help spread awareness about the site itself. And because of that, there has to be some way that revenue is coming in. While we did receive donations, we also had that ability to offer banner advertising. We earned money from businesses advertising on our site. That's a great example of how a nonprofit organization is still considered a business. Another example you may be interested in is a nonprofit organization that's very well known as the Make-A-Wish Foundation. Their mission has to do with helping children who are going through a hard time, they have an illness, and trying to make their wish come true for that child to help improve that experience. Now that costs some money. You'll see an example in the video now of the Bat Kid. Okay, try to take a look and recognize where some of the need for the money, some of the expenses might be for the Make-A-Wish Foundation.
He has the cape, the mask, and that famous car. And though he may not be old enough to drive this custom-made Batmobile, today this 5-year-old is teaching an entire city what it means to be a superhero. His name is Miles Scott, and while he's never fought crime, it turns out he knows a thing or two about putting up a good fight. He was diagnosed with leukemia at just 18 months. He's been battling it ever since. Well, today he's in remission, and that seemed like a pretty good reason to celebrate.
Your wish was to be Batman?
Yeah,
Why do you like Batman so much?
because he's my favorite superhero.
So as you saw with the Make-A-Wish Foundation and our Bat Kid, there's some expenses, even something as simple as the costume you see on the screen, to help drive their mission to make these wishes come true for the children that are in need of them. It's important to have some employees to help support those initiatives and to be able to buy things like this costume to provide to Miles. Okay. The difference between a traditional business you may think of under this definition and a nonprofit business is simply where the profit's going. In a traditional business, it's going into shareholders' pockets, owners' pockets, investors' pockets, and they might buy something like a house with it. Okay. For a nonprofit organization, most of that money is going back into the business to help further support a mission like the Make-A-Wish Foundations. Another concept that you'll see on the screen is this idea of a strategic alliance. This is important because we're seeing this happening more in business today. We have businesses coming together to create competitive advantage, and Amazon's a great example of that. Now, many of us use Amazon. We want to buy something like a textbook, and you can go on that site and not only see options to purchase through Amazon, but also from another number of other businesses. And that's a big deal. If I go on the site to buy a book and Amazon offers it new, but it's too much money, and I decide I want to buy it new, I have the option to buy it from a business like ABC Books. I may have never heard of that business before, but because I'm loyal to Amazon and I'm looking at my options, I may end up buying from this ABC Books they have listed on their site. Now, why would Amazon do that? Why would they lose my business so that I can go buy from ABC Books? Well, you and I, most consumers, they're pretty savvy these days. They can look around at those other businesses anyway. By offering this centralized solution to its customers, Amazon's saying, hey, find the product you need, get it from us. If it's not from us, get it from another business. They're not going to lose 100% of that sale. Okay, while they don't get my entire revenue from purchasing the book, they will get a piece of it that they're able to take by partnering with ABC Books and offering to sell it on their site. Okay, this provides an advantage to Amazon as well as ABC Books. Amazon is a very well-recognized brand. We'll learn more about brand recognition when we get to our marketing piece. Okay, the fact that they have so many loyal customers who will start first at Amazon looking for something like a textbook, it helps let ABC Books capture those customers that may not have known about their business or utilize them otherwise. That's a great example for you of this concept of a strategic alliance. Now that we have some foundational concepts of business, we're going to move on to learn an important part of this, which is best places to work in America. Now I want to talk to you about this because so many of you are already working or you will be soon. It's important to see some of these businesses and see some of their best practices and what can make them a great place to work. In case you're ever an employer, you ever open your own business, there's also some best practices for you to consider and how you want to treat your employees. Throughout the course, again, you'll see links to more information and current information. Here you'll see the list of some of the best places to work in America. You might guess that the best place to work in America very often is Google. You might use Google a lot to run searches. Okay? Now, the lesser known best place to work that's generally on the top of that list still today is known as SAS. SAS is a privately held organization out of North Carolina that offers analytics solutions, mostly software, to some major clients such as the U.S. Census Bureau. Now, what makes SAS unique is that they offer a number of extra benefits that are not the standard. Okay, while many businesses offer healthcare support, they offer things like vacation time, sick leave, benefits that you kind of see from job to job. SAS offers even more benefits above and beyond what's really necessary. And they do this to help attract some of the best talent. By doing so, they get to be a best place to work. And so if they're looking for some of the top people with great experience, great education, really, they're going to go to the places that are known as the best places to be, like Google, like SAS. So you'll see throughout the video some of these benefits. For example, they provide a 35-hour work week. Doesn't that sound great? And that helps keep their turnover low. Turnover are people who are actually leaving an organization each year, whether it's voluntarily by choice or being terminated by the employer. 2 out of 100 people each year is a very small number, especially for that industry. That allows them the ability to cut costs in their recruitment efforts and to really gain a lot of productivity from the people they do bring on board. Let's take a quick look at SAS.
SAS is in the high-end analytics business, where we try to help businesses optimize a lot of their business processes. For the most part, we supply software to our clients for their use. We have about 3,000 software developers, predominantly here in the U.S. We have a few in India and China, but it's predominantly here in the U.S.
The culture here at SAS is really focused on creating an environment that fosters creativity and innovation. So all of the programs and services that we provide to our employees are about reducing distractions so that they can focus on the work. So whether it's the core benefits that we offer, benefits like our medical, dental, vision, disability benefits, profit sharing, the 401k, or some of our more convenience benefits like the recreation and fitness facility for our employees, or the on-site health care facility that's available free of charge to our employees and their families. We have the on-site daycare. It is primarily paid by the company. Our employees pay about $400 a month for a benefit that's typically costs about $1,500 a month.
So you saw in the SAS video lots of great benefits that they offer through this beautiful campus to really try to create that work-life balance and help provide some productivity for their workers. Now moving forward, we're going to look at what's known as the factors of production. You'll see 4 noted on the screen: natural resources, human resources, capital, and entrepreneurship. First, looking at natural resources. Okay. Natural resources are inputs that are useful in their natural state. Things like land that you might use for a building site for your business. Okay. Other resources you might need in order to develop your product. Another factor of production you'll see on this side of the screen is known as capital. This includes technology, some of the tools, information that help support a business. Okay. For example, being able to use something like a computer, as I am now, in order to help support my role. Now, entrepreneurship is something we'll focus on later on in this course. It's the willingness to take risks necessary to start and operate a business and to provide innovation and really growth. That focus on the risk-taking and the growth and further development of the business is a big piece of entrepreneurship that's really necessary for a business to be successful. Finally, the people. People are such a huge part of a business. Usually they're one of the biggest expenses that a business has. On top of that, one person can really make or break how well your business can be. A bad experience with an employee for customer service interaction, or even just a good manager, okay, can make a big difference in how your business operates. Here we're looking both not only at physical labor, so something like building at a construction site, but also intellectual inputs. I'm a lawyer, so some of the skills that you have to use in thinking critically and helping support your clients is something important in the legal field. Moving on, we're going to talk today about the private enterprise system. The private enterprise system is an economic concept that was really founded by Adam Smith, who you see featured on the screen. We're going to look at some parts of this. First of all, when we talk about capitalism, that's a type of economic and political system in which a country's trade and industry are really controlled by private owners, someone like you or me, rather than the state or the government. Now, this idea Adam Smith came up with has to do with the idea of the invisible hand. It's a metaphor he conceived that describes the marketplace as self-regulating. The idea there is that we can have a pizza place. If there's one pizza place, and imagine they're charging you $100 a slice, are you going to eat it? Probably not. You'd expect to pay maybe $2, $3 for that pizza slice. Well, that's because there's this competition. So even if there's not a lot of regulation, by having the ability to have competition, other businesses selling pizza, it will help drive that cost down. One business can't charge $100 a slice for pizza when there's many others that are offering it for $2 or $3. It better have a significant quality advantage if they're charging more. So by doing so, consumers like you and I, we actually receive more options, better quality, and lower prices that are a result of this kind of self-regulating marketplace. If pizza starts getting offered for $1 from every single place, you'll generally see that price starts being driven down as well. Now, laissez-faire is another term related to that idea of the invisible hand, this idea of very minimal government intervention in an economy. And our U.S. economy here in the United States is a great example of these kind of concepts we're talking about in the private market, private enterprise system. Okay, we do have a lot of competition that allows consumers lower prices, more options, better quality, and generally businesses are owned by the profits going to an individual rather than so much government control as you might see in other nations. At the heart of that, you'll see competition. It helps regulate our economic life, and it's really the key premise of this idea of capitalism we spoke about just now. Each firm then needs to find a competitive differentiation, their competitive advantage, what separates them from all their competitors. So for example, while many pizza places like Domino's, Pizza Hut, Papa Gino's have low-cost pizzas, it might not be the best quality pizza. You might go to a place like Matchbox on Rockville Pike to get a more gourmet pizza, and you might be willing to pay a little more for that. That quality pizza can be an advantage for Matchbox. Whereas something like Domino's having very quick delivery and great tracking systems for its pizza can also serve as a differentiator and an advantage for them as well. Now, when we talk about competition as the heart of capitalism, there's 4 types of competition that you should be familiar with. The first is what's known as perfect competition. Here, this exists when there are many consumers buying a standardized product from many small businesses. No seller is big enough or influential enough to affect the price. Sellers and buyers accept the going price, which is determined primarily by supply and demand, which we'll learn more about shortly. Produce, something like an apple, is a great example of that. Okay, we can buy an apple at many different grocery stores. We'll generally see them around the same price point. Another form of competition is what's known as monopolistic competition. Here we still have many sellers, just like perfect competition. However, they don't sell identical products. Instead, they differentiate a little bit. Products that differ somewhat are perceived to differ, even though they have a similar purpose. You see on the screen some fast food organizations you might be familiar with, McDonald's and Burger King. Okay, both sell food in a fast delivery, low-cost option. Okay, McDonald's at one point was known to keep their delivery service, their fast food service line, when you're going in to get food from McDonald's and you go through the drive-thru, down to an average of a minute wait. I mean, that's an impressive amount of time to be able to get your food and get going. And in the US, that's something a lot of people really want and demand because they're so on the go. Burger King does something similar, but maybe not as such a fast time frame. They also offer some different products. For example, at Burger King, you might be able to get a frozen drink, whereas McDonald's might not have that. Now, that's constantly changing as they're competitors and they're going to match each other and try to steal each other's best practices to try to attract the same type of customers. An oligopoly is another form of competition. Here there are few sellers. Okay, each seller also has a very large portion of all the products sold in the marketplace. The cost of starting a business can also be very high. A great example of this is the cell phone industry. You'll notice there's only a few different organizations that you can purchase and maintain cell phone service through. For example, AT&T and Verizon are some of the big cell phone providers. You'll also notice Sprint and T-Mobile on the screen. Okay, they're able then to really drive the market in an interesting way. You'll notice Verizon and AT&T can charge quite a bit for their cell phone service, and they hold a pretty large part of the market. You know, if you think about it, if AT&T was the only cell phone provider and you just need your cell phone, you need to access your email on the go, you need to send text messages, you need all those apps, you need to be able to get on the web, you will pay more. You know, you might be paying $500 a month, even though that's so much more than what is being charged now, something like $100. If you need it and they're the only ones able to supply it, then you're going to see the price drive up. You know, here, while there's some competition, because there's only a few competitors in the market space, you still see prices can be relatively high. You know, AT&T and Verizon can both charge $100 for a service T-Mobile might only charge $50 for, but because they're larger and they have more of the market, people might be more willing to pay that in exchange for a larger service. It's a very interesting dynamic. The final form of competition you'll see on the screen then is what I was speaking to in my AT&T example, this idea of a monopoly, when there's only one seller. There are very few examples of monopolies that exist in the United States because our economic system is so driven around this idea of capitalism and competition. Okay, the government really limits this idea of monopolies. Most are either natural monopolies or legal monopolies that you'll see. So again, like my example, if AT&T is the only one to offer a cell phone, we can see prices through the roof, quality can drop, and ultimately that will not benefit consumers. And it doesn't really give a lot of incentive to AT&T to keep trying to improve their business, their product, offering better services, better products to the customer. So ultimately, in a capitalist system, you should see, with all the competition there, some benefits both for the businesses and for the customer. We're going to talk more now about economics, supply and demand, and equilibrium price. Let's start with economics. Many of you are working on a business associate's degree here at the school. Now, in this degree program, you'll learn more about a lot of the topics that we're learning about throughout the course. Economics is a great example of that. Now, just looking at economics at a high level, it's the analysis of choices. Again, we talked about this earlier in the lecture. It's choices people and governments make in allocating resources that are often scarce. There are two forms of economics we generally speak to. One is known as microeconomics, and the other is known as macroeconomics. Microeconomics talks more about smaller economic units. Some examples of those would be consumers, families, businesses, as you see on the screen. Let's look at a quick activity that'll help give you more information about microeconomics. Okay, here, this activity helps to illustrate what's known as the cost-benefit principle. This is the mother of all economic ideas. Here it says you should take an action if and only if the extra benefit from taking it is greater than the extra cost. So let's think about this in terms of microeconomics and how our consumer choices as individuals relate. I'm going to try to zoom in here so you can read what's on the screen. So the first example that you'll see, okay, you're about to buy a $20 alarm clock at the campus store next door when a friend tells you that same clock is available for $10 at a Kmart downtown. Do you go downtown and get the clock for $10 or at the nearby campus store for $20? Now, some of you may not have the transportation to get to a further location. For others, it might just be convenience that you'd rather pay the $20 and go out of your way to go to another store. Some of you might hate Kmart enough to avoid it and pay the extra money, whereas others will really be driven by this price change. So those choices impact those businesses as a whole. Another example of that, you're about to buy a laptop for $2,510 at the campus store next door. Same situation as the alarm clock, you can go to Kmart to get the same type of laptop. It's going to be $2,500, same warranty as it would have had at the bookstore. Where would you buy the laptop? Many of you will likely say the bookstore now, but we're still talking about $10. You see, as now $10 is such a smaller part of the overall price of the product, it's a lower percent of what the product actually costs, then it might not matter as much. But in both examples, it's still $10. Still $10 to go take that trip. Think about it one more time. You have 2 business trips coming up and you have a discount coupon you can use on only one of them. You can either save $90 on a $200 trip to Chicago, or you can save $100 on your $2,000 trip to Tokyo. Now you still have to take both trips. So which one to use the coupon for? The $90 off is almost half price savings on that trip to Chicago, whereas $100 off $2,000 doesn't seem to be as much savings. Overall, though, you're going to save $90 versus $100. You're going to lose out on that $10 again. In all 3 examples, we're talking about $10, but you can see the perception in terms of the price and the value can change significantly for the consumer. Ultimately, those choices then will affect which business actually gets that revenue. Moving on, we'll talk more about macroeconomics. Now, these are issues that face an entire society, the much larger level choices. This is really important. You see it on red in the screen. Political, social, and legal environments differ in every country. And as business is getting more global, it's something to be familiar with. To create unique economies, generally classified as what we'll talk about now. The key distinction in all these different classifications is really who has the right to profits. Now, in the first example we've talked about already, the private enterprise system. Who has the right to profits? It's people like you and me, the business owners. As we discussed, competition helps to drive prices down, quality up, and it increases consumer choice. At the heart of this enterprise system is this idea of competition, and really government is more hands-off with minimal regulation in our economic system in the United States. Now, a planned economy is a little different. Here, the government controls determine business ownership, profit, and how resources are allocated. There are a couple types of planned economies you'll see on the screen. In a socialist economy, government ownership and operation is of really major industries, things like healthcare, communications. There's still some private ownership as well, and Canada would be a good example of that. In communism, really property is owned and shared by the community, and there's a lot of central control by government over really most industries. China would be a great example for a communist economy. Now you can see a mix of this as well, okay, where we see different factors from each of those previous concepts integrated into an economy. Now we're going to learn more about the forces of supply and demand. These are really important terms to understand, starting with supply. This is the amount of goods and services for sale at different prices. Regardless of demand, you'll see on the supply curve the relationship between different prices and the quantities the sellers will offer for sale. Sellers prefer to charge higher prices for their product. Now, it makes sense if you charge more money. If I charge $10 and it only costs me $2 to make something, I get an $8 profit. Okay, that's a big deal. Movement along the supply curve is really the opposite of movement along the demand curve we'll talk about in a moment. As prices rise, the quantity that sellers are willing to supply will also rise. Okay, so for a luxury good, something like a really, really nice car, let's say a Lexus for some of you, you'll see less options available. Okay, they can't offer a flood of Lexus on the market because then it's not really this luxury item. We want there to be some exclusivity to it. And so there you'll see that the supply is limited and ultimately they're able to charge higher prices then as a result. Now on the demand side, this is a really important thing to think about in terms of not only just someone wanting something, but also their ability to get it. You know, my daughter might want to buy a toy, but she's not the one who's going to buy it. I am. So when we think about demand, you need to think about the willingness and ability of consumers to purchase goods and services at different prices. I might not be able to buy that Lexus. It might be too high of a price. The demand curve reflects the amount of a product buyers will purchase at different prices. Price is an underlying cause of movement, but there's a lot of other factors that impact demand. Things like competition, price, larger economic events. For example, if suddenly an economy is not doing so well, employment's down and less people have jobs, there's going to be less people to be able to buy those products. If demand increases or decreases at every price, a whole new curve could also be created. This all relates to a really important concept called the equilibrium price. Okay, this is where the supply and demand curve meets. I'm going to zoom in on the screen here so that you can see a little more. Equilibrium is the price at which the quantity demanded by buyers, the amount the buyers want, actually equals the quantity that sellers are supplying. At the equilibrium price, every buyer is able to find a seller and vice versa. There will be a surplus if the quantity supplied of a product exceeds the quantity demanded, generally because the price of a product is above the market equilibrium price. So for example, if I have 50 textbooks and only 20 students who need them, I will have a surplus of 30 textbooks. It's very unlikely that those extra 30 will sell if there's only 20 people interested in buying them, especially at that price. Likewise, a shortage can result when the quantity demanded for a product exceeds the quantity supplied. Generally, the price of the product is below the market equilibrium price. Now, this can happen if you have, let's say, 20 textbooks and suddenly 50 students that need them. The other 30 are going to be looking around trying to find a book and not able to find one. So a way to help illustrate this idea of the supply, demand, and the equilibrium price is an activity where we get to look at pizza. Now, I chose pizza for this activity because I have a lot of pizza fans in my classes, but if you're not a pizza fan, you can choose a different type of food and just substitute it in for yourself to think through this activity. So think about it this way. Imagine the price of pizza from a restaurant has dramatically increased to $75 a pizza. Now I think on average we could say a pizza ranges from $5 to $20 depending on quality, but most of us are not spending $75 on a pizza. So what do? What will your pizza eating habits change? What factors influence your decision? So think about things like, why do you eat pizza? Do you eat it because you really like the taste to socialize, or is it simply the price? Now for me, it's easy. I'm on the go, I need a simple dinner, it's a low-cost option, and it tastes good too. What portion of your discretionary income, the money you have left over after paying all of your bills to buy some of the things you might want, like pizza, do you currently spend on it? If you think about it, if you get pizza once a week, you maybe spend 20 bucks on that. That's about $80 a month that you're spending on pizza. How would that change? Suddenly, if it's $75 a pizza, it might be, I'm not eating pizza anymore, and now 0 of my discretionary income is going to that product. Or it might be, I'll buy it once a week. Still, and now suddenly you're paying almost $300 a month for pizza. That might just be too large of an expense. What about your friends and your family? Will they influence you in any way? Is it something where you're going to feel like I need to buy pizza still because it's what we've always done, or hey, this is an exciting luxury kind of thing and I need to do this. I'm taking someone on a date just like we would buy steak or lobster. I need to impress them with pizza. You also have to think about what substitutes are available. Maybe I'm not going to buy pizza from a restaurant anymore. I can get dough and cheese and sauce and toppings from the grocery store, and I can make it myself. That business is still going to lose me as a customer because of those substitutes. Would this price result in a surplus or a shortage of pizza? What do you think? So hopefully you've thought through that this will be something that will result in a surplus of pizza. We simply will not have enough buyers to purchase the pizza at that price point. And maybe that'll change over time. Maybe pizza will be the new lobster and $75 will just be perceived as the quality price you have to pay for what's the full meal. Something I like to point out, if you go out to a restaurant, especially in this area, you could easily spend $75 on having a full meal. So if you can get a pizza for $75 that can feed, 2 people, it's a pretty full meal. It gets your belly full. It still gets that same end point. Maybe it's worth it for some of you. But for most of you, this is probably going to deter you from eating pizza from restaurants anymore. For the next part of our conversation today, we're going to identify the stages of economic performance. These are business decisions and consumer behaviors that differ at various stages of the business cycle. Let's take a look. The first form of economic performance is what's known as prosperity. You'll see all the dollars on the screen, $100 bills. This is what's known as prosperity. There's high consumer confidence, businesses are expanding, and it's really a good place to be for an economy. Now, a recession's not as great. Here, this is the cyclical economic contraction that usually lasts for 6 months or longer. Here we're going to see lower rates of employment, less people with jobs. As businesses have less people buying, they need to let people go. And it's usually not a great place to be for an economy. In the cartoon on the screen, you'll see it says, "We did put aside money for a rainy day, but we were thinking less torrential downpour and more scattered showers with a chance of some sunshine." You need to be prepared. If the economy changes, you own a movie theater and suddenly people don't have as many jobs, or they're worried they're going to lose their job, they're worried about that income still coming in, they might be less likely to go out to the movies and spend that money. They might be saving it more, and that can impact your business as a whole. Now, depression is an extended recession, so of course this is really not a great place for an economy to be. Okay, we've been there before, and you really see a lot of higher unemployment rates, less people being employed. You'll see businesses suffering as a result, and it makes people nervous about how much money they have, and it's not a good place for the economy to be, because suddenly we don't have people making purchases, we don't have jobs, people are able to make those purchases, and overall it can cause an economy to suffer. Hopefully you move to this point, which is the recovery stage. Here we will see a decline in unemployment. More people will be employed, and as a result, you'll see increased business activity. Okay, more people able to make purchases. The cartoon on the screen says economic recovery formula. You forgot to carry the one. Here we're just trying to recover and figure out how do we make this work. Now, let's understand how we measure an economy's performance then to determine which of those 4 categories an economy might fall into. To learn more about economic indicators, again, we're just looking at a very high level at these topics. I encourage you to dive deeper into these resources you see on the screen. You'll see at this first link some information about various economic stats that might interest you. For example, the median income, the average income in the United States. So all these different types of economic statistics that might be of interest to those of you that do want to dive a little deeper into this topic. Now, one of the first ways we measure an economic performance is this idea of productivity. Here we're looking at the relationship between the goods and services produced and the inputs needed, the resources needed to produce them. So you'll see an equation on the screen. We're looking at what's actually being produced divided by what's needed to produce those things. Now, some good indicators of those are the gross domestic product. This is the GDP. It's good to be familiar with this terminology, as in the business field you may hear these things being said in the business room or with some of your colleagues, and so it's also good to know for that reason. The gross domestic product, or the GDP, is the sum of all goods and services produced within a nation's boundaries. It's a measure of national productivity. Going deeper into this on the screen, I'm going to zoom in for you so you can see. You can get more information from the Bureau of Economic Analysis. They promote a better understanding of the United States economy by providing the most timely, relevant, and really accurate economic accounts data in an objective and a cost-effective manner. So to help see examples of how we measure performance, like the gross domestic product, you can go to the www.bea.gov site. You'll see on the screen now. Okay, here we can see gross domestic product as well as other indicators available on the screen for you. I encourage you to take a look. Now, in the interest of time, I'm going to show you another great thing, which is the debt clock. This is a cool economic indicator. It shows the component of the federal budget and cumulative debt. And it's funny because it's always moving. As we take a look now, you can see just on the screen as we're talking it through. Let me go ahead and move this so you can see it better. Okay, here you can actually see the U.S. national debt in the top corner here, and as it increases just as we're talking, which is really amazing. So I encourage you to take a look at that as well. All of these are indicators of how our economy is performing. Another good indicator of how our economy is performing is price level changes. Here we look at the changing prices known as the Consumer Price Index, the CPI. based on the average monthly change in prices of goods and services. So we might look at, let's say, a carton of milk and see what was the price of a carton of milk 3 months ago versus the price today. Again, to get more information on that, you can click this button here. The Consumer Price Index program produces monthly data on changes in these prices paid by urban consumers for a representative basket of goods and services. So something like bread, milk, apples, things commonly purchased. So to access that data, you can visit this site. You can also see an average consumer spending by clicking on this here. Hopefully this graph will appear well for you. And again, I just need to move this around so you can see on the screen. Let me zoom out. Okay, so here we can see, some of the different amounts of money being spent on various areas. So food and beverage, 15%, recreation, 6%, a large portion on transportation. So again, that may be of interest to you. Another way that we measure our economic performance is through employment levels. Okay, remember, we look at a lot of different factors. It's not just one of them, so we can't just look at the unemployment rate. While it's a major factor, we also need to look at things like the gross domestic product, like the Consumer Price Index that we've talked about previously. The unemployment rate is one of these factors that does help us measure an economy's performance. This is the percentage of the total workforce that's actively seeking work, but currently unemployed. So that doesn't account for someone who is unemployed, they do not have a job, but they're not really looking for one. Okay, and that could be for a variety of reasons. But it does account for people who are actively interviewing, trying to find a job, and are unable to obtain one. To learn more about the unemployment rate, you can click on the link on the screen. Now this is interesting because as less people are employed, they have less income coming in to spend on items, which ultimately causes businesses to have to cut more employees because their revenues start decreasing as well. So lower unemployment rates, more people being employed, really benefits an economy. We've come to the end of our conversation on business and economics today. I hope you learned more about some business foundations as well as economics and how it relates to our course. I look forward to talking with you more on some other topics.